Welcome to the No Nonsense Sustainability Podcast. I'm Ildiko Amash-Simsik, and today we're tackling a couple of buzzwords around accountability, community responsive outcomes, and policy implementation. My guest today is Nina from Bankwatch, whom I met for the first time today in person, but we have been in touch over the years thanks to our clients and joint projects. Nina, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for this invitation.
To kick things off, can you share one part of your job that makes you the proudest?
Oof. As civil society organization representative, like our mission, and this is what I truly believe in, is to make the life of people better. And I've been working in this sector like for 20 years or something, using, different focuses like environmental, sustainable development, and now a bit more on human rights, and different leveraging instruments, government, MDVs, corporations. But the purpose of this engagement or this advocacy was always around making communities, right holders' life on the ground better, more safe, more clean, more just, more engaging, more empowering. And at the current position of my work with the Bankwatch, this is what I'm proud, that when we manage to convince or negotiate with the multilateral development banks, in my case, the EBRD, improvement of their investment projects or policies, which potentially could impact even the broader implementation or the project sustainability and a positive impact. That's when I'm proud. So when we do these fact-finding missions to the different countries, Central Asia, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, the Caucasus, and when we firstly engage with those communities which are struggle for different reasons because those projects are not implemented properly, they're damaging their labor rights or land rights, and then we come to London or maybe meeting with bankers at other venues and start negotiating, sometimes fighting, sometimes really trying to convince, sometimes doing lobby, different instruments. But when we succeed even a little bit to improve the project design or project location or ensure there is meaningful stakeholder engagement. I know it's a buzzword. Nevertheless, now we try to move from stakeholder to right holders because we believe it covers better the essence of public participation in decision making. So when we manage to do that and people feel that they're more engaged in decision making, they feel that there is more attention, for example, to how the waste management is done. They got the compensation, for example, for the land that they lost. So it's not an easy way. Successes are not that many, but when they happened, I'm very proud of myself and my team.
No, thanks for that. And as I told you, one of the reasons I wanted to have you here is because when I started working for one of these development banks, I was convinced we're the good guys. And then I met you. And you thought you're the good guys. And I just thought, okay, then who's right, who's wrong? How do we build this projects together? And how do we help each other if seemingly we both want the same things? So I guess we can start with the buzzword-worthy definition of accountability and how these institutions often talk about what you're talking about. We ensure community-responsive outcomes through rigorous stakeholder-inclusive frameworks aligned with internationally recognized best practice. I'm sure you've heard this before, and you know that often these are just words and the implementation does not reflect this aspiration. So if you had 60 seconds to explain what accountability is without using a buzzword, what would you say?
I would say accountability is responsibility for your actions promises, commitments, and inactions in some cases, which includes that in case you do mistake or fail your promise, you must be responsible and capable and able and be open to explain why it's happened, to take actions to fix the problem, to take actions to remedy the harm, for example, if it's in the place, and learn the lesson to make sure that this mistake or failed commitment or whatever failed promises happened won't be repeating in the future.
Okay. To me, and as someone who's worked on all sides of this, as part of the bank, for developers, as a consultant for a bigger consultancy, for me, it means that when we say something will happen, it will happen. And if it doesn't happen, we explain why that is and try to make it happen. Like
Exactly.
in like very, very like simplistic terms. But then, returning to my earlier point about who are the good guys, what is the mission of a watchdog organization that you work for?
But this is pretty much around the keeping those MDBs, should we say, development banks, multilateral development banks, public banks. You know, it's a struggle, especially when you use not English. It's a difficult concept to explain to the communities, actually.
Exactly.
Even that's the challenge, and I would say the banks do not care that much even about like explaining how it all works to people, to right holders, to the communities, about the system, the concept of the multilateral development banks. But nevertheless, that's our mission, that's our task as a watchdogs, to hold those banks accountable for their failed promises, failed commitments, and mistakes. The overall idea of the multilateral development banks, it's a development.
Yes. It's the good thing.
It's unfortunately the buzzword, because it's insane sometimes how differently people understand development. And there is definitely gap between how Western actors, stakeholders see the development from how the local communities from like global south or developing countries see that.
There is a difference between creating a project specifically to bring a benefit, like a development benefit, like that we traditionally understand as development, or building a piece of infrastructure with the safeguarding, and I pronounce myself, with a mandate to not cause more harm.
Yes.
And that's where, you know, there was a discussion a few years ago that it's an identity crisis for a lot of these development banks, because they call themselves that. But if you look at their portfolio, it's maybe that, maybe not that.
Yeah, I guess it's like we're getting to this like a very extremely complicated world of human beings, because it's also about when I see like, because we do work with a specific investment, we oversee specific investment projects, and our like mission and objective to help the communities to benefit or get, if there is a damage, to get that harm remedied. But we do also work, and I'm in particular with the policy, with the safeguards, with the regulation of how those banks operate, like environmental, social integrity, etc., to kind of secure a bit more like broader implications for broader range of the projects. And when we work with the specific projects, you know, we quite often face this like notion that there are like individuals' interests and rights, like a community members or communities, versus the collective rights, like a population. I guess like this renewable energy project these days is a very good example of that. And I've been working a lot before on environmental issues like a climate change, and this is what we were fighting a lot to have this like a clean energy, increase share, right? That was like the way to deal with climate change. And now it's like really spreading like broadly, large scale, a lot of investments, big capacity, like renewable energy projects. But that it looks like it's good, right?
Yeah,
it's
no,
gonna
exactly.
be like a clean energy, like, green energy, renewable energy. So we are succeeding.
Yeah.
But then it kind of clash with the biodiversity objectives and people. Exactly. And then when we say, like, guys, you build like solar energy project or huge wind power plant project next to the community, and community is not benefiting from that at all, like zero, like no employment, no proper compensation for the land, because most likely in those countries there are no like land rights, like private property, etc. And they're not benefiting even from this green energy. They're not getting that. But at the same time, if you look at the country level, the share of the renewable energy and implementation of like a climate commitment of the country, of the government, is kind of getting better, right?
No, I know, and that's like something that I actually like wrote about and advocate for actively, that there's such a disconnect between this macro level sustainability and what actually happens, because you and I both know what it means when they take land for a wind farm. You take a little piece, sometimes it's less than whatever 10% of the land. They get compensated based on market value, and because what do you replace? Like, how do you calculate that? And then they're stuck with this piece of infrastructure forever because there's no decommissioning. And it used to be, so I used to work on larger infrastructure before, and like hydropower, like, and it was much more of a push for a developer to talk to the people, because they were building this thing for 5, 10, 7, 10 years. And renewables are built in a year and a half. And then the operator comes in. So in terms of incentives, the developers are often putting up with it for a year or two, because then it's not their long-term problem.
Exactly. And when it's in operation stage, like the labor demand is so low.
Yeah, it was zero. But then, like, returning back to how you find these projects, I mean, obviously we know that some things are higher risk. We know that there are infamous return clients with the track record. How do you select these projects that you follow?
Yeah, we have like multiple factors which influence the decision, and unfortunately, apart from the risk of the project itself, because we're also civil society organizations, we have some capacity limitations, funding limitations, and donors also have their own geographical priorities or the sector priorities, which we should also consider if we want to have some funding for our work. That's one of the criteria. Another criteria is, of course, if there is like active community or civil society organizations are present in the region or around the project site that we could cooperate, collaborate, and support. But in some cases,
that's like a little
cooperate. Okay, yeah.
Like how? Give us a real example. You have a project that meets these requirements. You actively engage with these NGOs, like, I buzz myself.
Yeah.
You email them and say, look guys, we're going to keep an eye on this. What do you think? Or how should we imagine in a life in a day in your life in the office?
Yes. So like two approaches. So for example, let's imagine Central Asia is clearly the priority for many donors, as well as Western Balkans, for example, because there are a lot of investments, still not strong local or country level environment social regulation, where probably more oversight is needed, not only from the development banks, but first of all from the civil society. And civil society is also not that advanced. That's why some international CSOs could step in and kind of support through the capacity building or direct oversight of the projects. And But Central Asia is also very diverse inside,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So, for example, in Kyrgyzstan or Kazakhstan, until recently, when unfortunately we witnessed the uprise of the authoritarian regime, all this foreign agent law introduction, etc. But before that, we've been working with some civil society organizations for a while. We keep contact. And for example, when we spot new investment project in the region, we just approach them and say, guys, do you know anything? Are there any concerns? Do you want to work together to check what's on site, whether people are happy, whether environmental protection is in place, and etc. And if they say, yeah, sure, for example, we do a joint like a mission on the project site. We talk to people around, or they can do it separately, and we can help with the engaging with the bank later on. We talk to the people, communities on the ground. We just observe, it depends on the project, like, whether there is some, like, I don't know, safety, security on the ground, right? If it's like renewable energy project, we can see the, even like observe the birds, the wildlife, so how it's managed, how diverse, and etc., etc. So we do all these checks, talk to people, and then we do like a joint report with the key findings, whether we believe there are some, it's going to be buzzwords, non-compliance with the bank's like policies and commitments, and then all together we bring those findings to the bankers' attention.
Yeah, I know that part.
Yes.
But then in terms of findings that might not meet this requirement, because often these could be more minor issues or could be issues that are present today, but there is a active commitment to remedy it like over time. How do you make that decision to actually email me? How bad it has to be for that email to go out?
I don't think it's hard to say that like this is important and this is not important, right? If it's like a non-compliance, if we can see that it contradicts to what the bank promised, committed. Because I mean, when we speak about those commitments and aspirations, it's usually quite like a general, but top level, like women empowerment, like climate change.
Well, not if it's in the ESAP. So if it's committed in the Environmental Social Action Plan, that's a condition of the financing under the loan.
Yes.
And that's usually like a long-term thing. So when we discuss amongst colleagues, like having an ESG rating is you take a photo and like that's a snapshot, or you spend one day on site and like you see what you see. But having the performance management is like shooting a movie. It's not linear up. There's like better days, worse days, and there's a overall gradual improvement over time.
Yes, definitely. So then, like, if there is an environmental social action plan available publicly, which is not the case for all the projects, right? As we know, it's mainly for the high-risk projects, which in case of some of the banks, it's very small share in the portfolio. So if there is an ESAP, Environmental Social Action Plan, and we can see, okay, what like gaps were identified and like mitigation measures proposed in the timeline, and even if we can see the progress update, which is also not always the case, then of course we can kind of assess our like findings from the ground against those commitments and implementation. Because if one of the recommendations or requirements under this Environmental Social Action Plan was to have, for example, monthly meetings with the community to update on the project or collect grievances, but we know from the communities that the last time when they had that meeting was when there were so-called formal public hearings or public consultations, probably before the approval or as a part of the environmental social impact assessment, this like formal process required by the government or something like that. And that's it. And then we can see that, it's not there. And then we, of course, approach, for example, the management and like ask like, what's going on, why it's not happening.
So first you go to the client.
No, bank. No,
Oh, okay.
no.
First you go to.
We go, yeah, but that's also kind of the overall strategy we do use. So we've been working in this development finance, meaning that we use the leverage. We can't directly engage with the government like public clients or the private clients, companies. We don't want to do that because we believe more effective way to do it via the banks. Because this is our like theory of change, let's say.
Okay.
So this is how it works. More effective, we believe, than obviously going directly to the government or public client in those countries which are lacking democracy. Let's put it nice way. I mean, similarly with the private sector, especially if it's a big corporations, usually for locals there is a high risk of retaliation and reprisal, and this is what we also don't want to put people under the risk as well as the bank watchers. So we believe that's the more effective way, because the bank also, we have a leverage over the bank because it's a public bank.
They have to listen to you.
Exactly. I mean, they have to listen because it's part of this accountability to the European taxpayers or European citizens, and we're, as a European civil society organizations, we have a right to kind of ask and even demand about how they spend, let's say, public money, European taxpayers' public money, and deal with the impact. But also for them, it's, and I actually truly believe that for them, it's also the way to do the risk management of the projects, because they can't, go to every project site to do site visits like regularly, right? And they appreciate our feedback sometimes not that much. But overall, there is this kind of agreement that this is a good risk management tool.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a show about real talk, and there were clients that were challenging to defend. Like, as someone who's worked on the inside, we did our very best. We saw we're the good guys. We tried to travel on site, send consultants, and there were still issues. And just having your email forwarded to management really helped our agenda as well. So, like, not all the time, but sometimes this was a very, very useful way to triangulate our findings and our observations and say, look, they went there and they found stuff that's like even worse than what we discovered.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy to hear that.
First time.
That's great. No, let's say, I mean, also speaking about, good guys and bad guys, I was thinking, yesterday after you sent me the questions, like, it's a bit hard when we speak about the banks as a legal entity.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably they're like, holding that much power, right? Having that much money, and obviously a lot of responsibility which comes with the power and money. And sometimes I'm getting super angry at them, at the bank as an entity, which is a bit also, I don't know, silly, right? Because this is legal entity. There are no, like, it's not the person, right? That they don't do the proper job. They could do more. They could commit more. But then, for example, when I go like down to the environmental and social department or civil society colleagues from the banks, and quite often I see very, very committed people who really want, to make a change or ensure, exactly as you came with this thinking that you want to improve this world, right? To make a change.
Exactly. I thought that's what I'm doing.
And I still believe that with all the, the reservations and challenges of the current world, I don't know. Okay, I'm not going to speak about all the MDBs, but some MDBs I still believe to, like, more like a good, stuff rather than the bads, to that extent, And especially now these days when this multilateral kind of concept and idea is challenged by...
I know, it's challenged by everyone.
Yes, I really, to some extent, want to preserve. Really, kind of, I feel it's a good to keep talking.
Yeah. So you want to keep us around, and so my next question is, how much insight do you have in the operations of these banks, like internally? Because I've worked in quite a few of these, and it's different everywhere. Some places you have more like environmental social colleagues approving like project categorization and reviewing the impact. In some places, the banking teams are very powerful. So even they're pushing back, they're pushing for the project to progress, even if you're like ringing the alarm. And of course, due to the nature of our work, like you don't really see that. But a lot of the people are fighting these internal politics.
Exactly.
And also, like, what kind of expertise do you need to be able to effectively do your work? Because it's not just the technical, and you're covering, you talked about environment, biodiversity, the birds especially, people, human rights, the financing instruments, the mandates of the like it's a lot of things.
Yeah, it took some time for me to learn how those MDBs operate and what the structure, the accountability kind of architecture. But I mean, there is no better word, right? Architecture, infrastructure, it takes times. But I can say, like, from Bankwatch, we have a quite diverse expertise. I'm personally have environmental sciences and policy background. Some people have like a journalism or gender studies, or it's more recent one, or international development. So it's a kind of, mix. You also learning by doing, pretty much. And as I always say, if there is an interest and commitment and you kind of share the values with like what civil society organization is doing, you can learn quite quickly. And speaking about this like internal dynamic at the banks and how much we're aware, like as I said, we mainly work with the, like on a daily basis, we closely work with usually with the environment social experts and civil society experts at the bank. But also, obviously, we do engage with the board members to raise concerns about how management do or doesn't do the job they're supposed to do. Or when it comes to the policy, of course, we do engage with the board to promote like improvements or strengthening some commitments or removing actually some dangerous propositions for the revised safeguards or something like that.
And how effective is that? Because often, the board, I can't speak for all the MDBs, but sometimes the initial steps of project concept approval, and then, like progressing with the project, that happens, the board just has like a high level overview on that. They know that it's whatever, a wind farm somewhere in Central Asia or a solar somewhere in some country. They don't, usually the client's name is there, and if they're switched on and interested, that should like ring a bell. But how effective is when you come in? Because I imagine you only find out about projects at the disclosure, or do you find out before?
Sometimes we find out before, but usually when the initial project summary documents are published.
Okay.
And I can't speak also about all the MDBs, but the one I'm particularly working on, they like for the like a big part of the project, especially high-risk projects, they always disclose pretty much in advance of the project approval by the board. So we have some time to do advocacy. But it's not just buzzword. It seems to be getting forbidden.
You're actually doing it. But like from my perspective, like once we put the project on the website that we're going to support this, we've done like a year or two of work and negotiation to put all of that together. So then you coming in with your complaints is like a little bit of a shock.
But it's also maybe important to understand that sometimes we get engaged with the board before the approval.
Yeah.
And this is when it's the best, especially if we discover some significant violations even of human rights, like environmental standards, especially when it comes to the retaliation or the land grabbing, not land acquisition, and this kind of thing. So, or it's like, if the client is the one that has a very negative track record or like, this repetitive factor.
Yeah.
And our idea, especially if the local groups or the CSOs are really against the project, so we really mobilize all the efforts to kind of inform and try to convince the board not to support that project. I know it could be also for you kind of because you spent so much time already doing diligence, preparing all this information. I know, but sometimes, it's necessary. But I should also say it's not quite often we're successful with that. Sometimes we manage to convince some of the board members.
Yeah.
Who finally could vote kind of against or abstain, but quite often still the final decision is kind of to support the project.
Okay.
And then during the implementation of the project, so we do approach the management first, trying to resolve those issues, and if we can see that there is either reluctance or really they're getting very defendant or resist to engage meaningfully, we go to the board kind of trying to explain that it's not how it should work.
Yeah. And then I would love to get your view on this concept of responsible exit or staying on transactions that are not going well, but we believe they're going better because we're on it. Yeah. And I was working on one of those, and we had this discussion, like, are we just exiting the deal? Are we not going to prepare it for board approval? And the internal consensus was that they're not doing well for whatever reason, but at least we're on the call with them multiple times every week as a team of lenders, like not just like one person scolding them, but it's like all of our combined opinion of what should be done. And if we remove that, yes, we're like safeguarding the bank's reputation and there's none of this conversation, but that doesn't eliminate the problem. So sometimes there is a very conscious decision to stay involved on very challenging deals, because you know that even if the change is a little bit, even if there's just a little tiny improvement, they're still better than what they would do without us.
Yeah, this is like a very typical, the typical pitch, or how you call it. We keep hearing from the management. It's better to have us than do not have.
But we genuinely think
exactly,
that, like,
and
as a part of these conversations.
Absolutely, yes, I can feel that it's really true and honest perception of how you could improve the project. Yes. But first of all, there are some projects which local communities, local civil society are against from the beginning. And they keep saying about that. Usually it's around the mining projects, you know. And then speaking about what development means, right? So then it's up to you to decide whether having mind developed with your presence probably in a bit more sustainable way, but against the will of the local communities. Is it development or it's not?
It's a really good question.
A very complicated one. So that's one example. And another example, in some cases, I agree. It's better to have you, and in like, let's say in many cases, we see how the presence or involvement of multilateral development banks help to secure the improvement, or, you know, kind of at least having this leverage over the client, right? But we had just recently such a case. But then, you know, okay, let's try, good. Like, let's mobilize all our efforts, like different MDBs, CSOs from our side. We're quite often even to engage in this like a multi-stakeholder dialogue, like banks, us, and the client. We're very solutions focused. So we are not like completely, you know, radical, saying never ever, right? We want to improve it for the sake of people and for the benefit of people and environment. We always come with a very specific recommendation. So we're ready to sit at the table and discuss. But then, you know, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4, 5, and there is no progress. We keep talking. I know, like, at least some environmental social experts from the bank side are really trying hard to make it happen. From our side, completely the same.
So you see,
but client, yes, no, as I said, I mean,
good.
no, seriously, as I said, like, you know, when we speak about the bank as a legal entity, I don't feel much, you know, sympathy. But when you go to the environmental, social, or sustainability department or team, I can see very committed people, very committed, very well educated, sharing the values of, you know, community development, people benefits, sustainable development in a good, you know,
a good way, not in a buzzword.
Absolutely, and I can see how they're trying hard, but I also accept that they have their own limitations within the institution, within the government, within this like multilateral development institution architecture per se. Yeah, I mean, I understand those limitations, but what I am trying to say that it's good to have you, the banks, multilateral development banks, in the projects, but at some point you should say enough, because it's not working. Because at some point you're just legitimizing the very bad client, very bad project.
But then they repay.
Exactly.
Or another way to get out of the deal.
Exactly. But as I just recently discussed also with the colleague of ours, we have such actually exactly like you explained the project in Uzbekistan. So we've been engaging with the bank, with the client, like for 5 years, starting from the pre-approval stage, like really alarming about the projects. And the management team really did a good job about the ESAP, Environmental Social Action Plan. It was really strong. It integrated many recommendations from the civil society, very committed team, and we really, you know, try to push the company in the right direction. But then, you know, the retaliation against local communities, human rights defenders, and the workers increased tremendously. And, you know, so there was the situation when like civil society organizations and the bankers were sitting at the table in London, nicely discussing how to improve the project. But people on the ground were suffering from this like intense retaliation imposed by the client and by the local authority. And it, you know, the more we engaged with the bank and the client, obviously there was more pressure, and the more it kind of trickled down to the local communities. And at some point my colleague said, but, you know, this engagement doesn't make any difference for people. Yeah, they keep suffering. And then company, exactly, I mean, it's not clear how they resolve it with the bankers, but company after 3 years just prepaid the loan.
Yeah, and then I think it's important that you often bring facts from the ground that don't reach us otherwise.
Exactly.
Because our main source of information is the
Client, exactly.
And while they may admit to some shortcomings, they don't admit to the big shortcomings.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the issues, some are more factual. Yeah. Like somebody got fired with seemingly no good reason. Somebody got injured because the OHS or the health and safety was not there. Like this is more, obvious that there is the issue. But we have both been in situations where it's more of a he said, she said. Like, is that retaliation? Could you prove it? And then it comes back to, and I'm speaking as the social specialist in one of these places, what's within our scope to look at? I ask myself many times when we encounter these issues, am I an investigator here? Is it my job to try to figure out what happened? What is the good way to move forward?
Yeah, I mean, this retaliation issue is and how to anticipate and how to respond and assess the risks is kind of getting pretty high to the agenda of the MDBs because of the overall shrinking civic space or the banks moving to new risky environment, new regions, countries, etc. So it's getting there. And this issue with he said like evidence and everything, it's like widely discussed. But it's interesting that like when it comes to the corruption or any other prohibited practices, the bank is fine with investigation.
Yeah, but that's a different function. That's not under the policy and not under ENF.
It's under the different policy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is also the part of this like safeguarding system, right? So so if they kind of prove the corruption or any other prohibited practices, the result is the client is a sanction list.
Yes.
Pretty strong, straightforward, good signal, right? Super effective instrument to prevent this kind of prohibited practices in the future. Right? But when it comes to retaliation, like the bank staff gets hesitant, like whether I should investigate, what kind of evidence, like whether but I don't see the difference.
But can you bring some like real examples for those who are not familiar with what retaliation is? Like what is it in real life?
In real life, it's when like right holders or affected communities or the workers who speak up, criticizing the project, the company, trying to defend their rights, which were violated in most cases, or experiencing or facing the negative impacts of the project. They hit this pressure from either the client, the company, or quite often those companies work together with the local authority or the government. How those pressure looks like? It could be calls from the police station, threatening, suggesting to stop speaking up, to stop being that vocal. It could be threats from the company, saying that if you're gonna keep, speaking up, you will lose your job. It could be threats from the security service to the public monitors or human rights defenders, suggesting that if you're gonna supply information about the projects, the problems at the project to the international civil society organizations or any other actors, we're gonna file a criminal case against you.
Okay.
Or, which we also see, speaking also about the evidence. And speaking about the evidence. So, I mean, how you imagine what kind of evidence in this situation, right? Like people recording audio or video of those talks and everything. Yeah, it would be good to have that.
Then it makes even legal to do that in some countries.
Exactly. But just imagine if you're in the position of that person who gets this call from the police station. Are you really in the kind of, mood immediately to switch on your phone to record that, I think you're immediately get very stressed, panicking, and etc. And if it's like especially consistent, of course, people not gonna do recording or like asking the security service agent, sorry, can I record you because I need to prove, to go to the, of course not. No one is gonna do. But for example, first of all, when it's like a repetitive practice, and in many cases we can say it's not just one isolated incident. It's happening with many people, affected people report that. And I guess that's a pretty much enough for the bankers to conclude that this is like a systematic retaliation or reprisal.
Have you ever had a project where this was successfully addressed?
We had a couple of projects where, just a bit, one step back. Another very good example of what is retaliation is, it's so-called SLAP, I admit, but I'm going to explain. It's a strategic litigation against public participation. This is what like big corporations and like private companies are widely using to silence civil society organizations, like or communities or individuals. So they file a suit case against those people or organizations, usually on the ground of or allegation of defamation or something like that. And then obviously those individuals or organizations are dragged into this litigation process, which consumes all energy, capacity, resources, money, and etc. And this is this very strategic way to kind of keep or make them keep silent and not being vocal. And this is, you can evident and prove pretty well, right? But in these cases, I should admit, especially when there is a SLAP, strategic litigation against public participation, the banks respond quite quickly.
Yeah.
And they manage to, in many cases, but not obviously in the most, to negotiate with the company to drop the lawsuit. Yeah. When it comes to those cases when people get the calls or threats or something like that, in some cases we managed to kind of protect and stop that retaliation against those persons. But it's not often, unfortunately. It's not often. It's also very much depends on the client, the leverage of the client. If it's a big corporation, I mean, they really don't need that money that much. They can easily prepay and like say bye, right? This is what they do. Or they also claim that you should prove that it's not us. It's like, local authority or it's a government,
Yeah. Have you ever been threatened or personally felt unsafe working on projects?
I started with Bankwatch as the community support coordinator, and my focus was on Uzbekistan and like Central Asia, a bit broader. And we like did a lot of traveling to the country to talk to and you know how the situation in Uzbekistan really, right? It's not easy place to go. But I was like quite enthusiastic, really open, trying to find different like limited number of civil society organizations that we could trust and work or engage with the communities, talk to people, etc. We did like proper security risk assessment before traveling there, just to make sure that, we have some like precautionary measures in place, and we're also well prepared in case there is some incident that the organization could respond. So we did some preparations in that sense. So we assume, especially in the beginning, there was a kind of surveillance over the us. I mean, I assume as in case of many international actors or civil society organizations coming there. But directly nothing like that. But a couple of years after those often visits to Uzbekistan, I heard from our partners that some like a security, like country level security service asked about me, like who I am, who's that person, what she's doing there. But also once we went to meet with the local groups, we were just sitting in the restaurant, just really chatting. It was like, informal dinner. And then the partners from the country spotted like two people sitting at the table next to us and recording. And but they said like, don't worry, it's fine. It's kind of usual thing because some of the high profile human rights defenders came to that meeting.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so they kind of expected that. But for us, it was like...
It's like in the movies, yeah?
Exactly, yes, exactly. It was very like a beautiful restaurant with a very good like Uzbek cuisine. So it was, yeah. But that's the reality. I'm not that worried about like myself because still I'm representing international organization. I have a bit more like also capacity on the organization side to engage, to respond, to protect, etc. But what I'm worried is those people, living there.
So going forward, if you had to close this discussion with a few points that could really improve the relationship with the banks, so that because it seems like you're working for the same goals. So it seems like there should be, I don't know what's the right word to say it, but like less hostility, more cooperation from like, I think, both sides. What would you say are the like 3 key things that should be changed to achieve that?
Again, I'm not going to speak about like all the MDBs because they're quite different, you know, in the approaches and everything. But what I definitely would recommend to change, it's quite pragmatic, but I have a feeling that it could work because, like, you know, quite often the safeguards, the standards are there, but then implementation is kind of the biggest problem. And then when we look like what's the reason for the, you know, weak implementation or all those gaps, quite often, or like sometimes, that's the matter of the capacity, again, from the bank side. I was just recently checking the data on the staff from the banking side and environmental and social kind of side department. And
it doesn't add up.
Absolutely. How you can expect those like 50, 60 people really manage, you know, the due diligence and secure the compliance of like hundreds
every year
projects in the portfolio.
400 or 500 projects every year plus monitoring. And you know, the monitoring requirements are different for each MDB.
Exactly.
Some monitor forever.
And we were discussing recently, I was sad that like in particular bank, like many people just, you know, left because of the mental breakdown, like, you know, the emotionally burned out because of the workload. And we can see that. So as I said, the commitment is there, but they're just, you know, drained. They can't like... I mean, it's definitely excuse for them as individuals, but that's not the excuse as an institution. And this is what we keep saying, especially if you're expanding to new regions, increasing portfolio, reporting all these like record investments, but there is no correlation or adjustments in the budget spending for the due diligence, for the compliance, for the monitoring, and etc. Then you're just faking, you know, or your commitments, because commitments and aspirations are good, but they should be backed up with the action plans, resources, and monitoring, right?
Yeah.
And if it's even one factor is not there, then it's just blah blah blah. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, it ties it back nicely to what I said. If you say you're going to do it, you have to do it. And if you're not doing it, then maybe your values don't align with how you're managing your operations.
With budgets.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
So if you say that sustainability, human rights, and the environment, the birds are important to you, that should be supported by hiring the right number of people to make sure that all the transactions are carried out accordingly.
Yeah, the same with the accountability mechanisms those banks have, right? Again, if you look at the budgets of those mechanisms and the budget of the banking team,
yeah, that's another episode.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming today. I really enjoyed having this discussion with you finally, because I was very curious to how you're selecting the project, how you're evaluating, and what's your strategy to make things better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting conversation, and with this like buzzwords, it made me also, be conscious about like explaining and maybe also understanding for myself better how, all these big buzzwords are really what they mean really for people and for our work. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. That was it today. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and we'll be back for some more buzzwords next time.